Say there, stranger, remember me? I'm that stranger who stalks your sanity. Or at least, that's what I used to be. And it must be true, because it rhymes. So I'm here on the 27th of April, 2024, to tell you something about the future of the Great Recovery, if it has one, and say a few things about myself, if I may be so bold. It's a wet, rainy, misty morning in a little Celtic fairyland somewhere between France and Portugal. And I'm sitting here in my den in front of the machine that allows me to release into the world a virtual replication of my voice. Followers of this channel will certainly have noticed that the material, I think it consisted of 10 talks on the Great Recovery, has been removed. And you might well wonder why, or perhaps even expect me to explain why. And I'm not going to do that. I'll tell you something about me personally, for what it's worth. I have a protocol, I have protocols regarding how I relate to other people. And one of my protocols is I never explain myself, not even to my closest and most intimate friends. I don't feel any obligation to explain what I do or say or write to anyone, far less to those of you who are complete strangers to me, whom I have not met and most likely will never meet. So if I don't feel obligated to explain myself to close friends, well, what do you think? Nevertheless, I do have a compulsion of explaining. It's a kind of disease. As a matter of fact, Don Juan was the main figure in a series of books by Carlos Castaneda, once told Castaneda that that is the sorcerer's disease, the need to explain things. And I do most certainly suffer from that disease, and probably will until my dying breath. So, I'm not going to explain why I scrubbed the Great Recovery, but I would like to talk about my legacy, and perhaps from what I say there, you can make some inferences of your own. I leave it to your discretion. I will say this, though, about the Great Recovery. I think it's a fabulous idea. And it seems to me, it looks to me, like it could be a grassroots movement that organically grows out of the current conditions in the world's drama. So back in the days of recovery, when I was fortunate to participate in those rooms, as we called them, for the ACA, Adult Children Anonymous, well, back in those days, everyone had one thing in common. Everyone who showed up in those rooms to spill their guts to complete strangers had one thing in common. They all came with the stories of harm, suffering, betrayal, and abuse in their childhood due to inadequate parenting. Very, very common situation. And likewise, fast forward to today, I venture to say that untold numbers of people, including perhaps yourselves, are in a situation of recovery from abuse. The abuse of the globalist technocrats and of the predasites who have an agenda to deceive, divide, and dominate others. And so, I wouldn't expect the movement of recovery to emerge until that situation is to some degree overcome and alleviated. And I do see this happening in the immediate future. And if it does happen, I believe it's bound to happen really, really rapidly. For instance, look at all the blowback that's occurring now against DEI and the woke mind virus, which, by the way, is an iteration of the Gnostic meme of the archontic infection, upon which I have spoken at great length. So look at how fast and hard the reaction against that movement, that agenda, that rhetoric, that gaslighting has occurred and is now unfolding. So not to be too optimistic, but I would say that if the woke agenda and everything implied in it, including the technocratic scheme of race supremacy, is overthrown, it happens fast, even faster than it came on. It goes even faster than it came on. And so in the aftermath of that, I don't think it's at all implausible to imagine people gathering one or two or three at a time, perhaps gathering in homes, in rooms, the back rooms of restaurants, wherever they can gather, as we gathered back in the heyday of recovery, and talk about overcoming all of that abuse and deception and manipulation. It seems like a natural occurrence. So I'm on record as proposing the movement of the Great Recovery along the lines of a higher iteration of the ACA recovery movement. So I take credit for introducing the idea, but I take no responsibility for its realization. I take no responsibility for its implementation in the world at large. It's a great idea. I would be so happy if it comes to pass as an organic development of our time. And that's all I have to say about it. Now, I know that I'm known for talking too long and talking too slowly, and some people can't handle that and they sign off. I don't know if you can imagine how it feels like to be me sitting in this room, but I can tell you I may as well be sitting in an empty auditorium talking to nobody there. And I don't like that, and I don't enjoy it. Nevertheless, there are things on my mind from time to time, and I choose to record them and put them out where anyone can hear them. So you can walk away anytime you like. You can click off, and many people do. As far as I can tell from the analytics, it's extremely rare for anyone to listen to one of my talks all the way to the end. So take it or leave it. It's up to you. What I have to say today is about my legacy, the legacy of a lonely hunter. You know, there's a book, and it was a film too, called The Heart is a Lonely Hunter. Have you ever heard about that? It was written by Carson McCullers, a really interesting, unusual woman who belonged to the genre of American literary fiction in the 20th century, known as, I believe, the Southern School, including people like William Faulkner, an extraordinary novelist, by the way. So Carson McCullers wrote this tragic novel, The Heart is a Lonely Hunter. And it's so true. It's such a beautiful meme. You can feel it in your heart. And what are you hunting for? What am I hunting for? What have I been hunting for all my life? The truth about the human condition and what's wrong in this world. I want to remind you, by the way, this is a slight footnote, that in the ancient wisdom of the East, some Buddhist teachers and some Vedic teachers preceding Buddhism made a strong distinction between two kinds of truth, which can roughly be translated as conventional truth and absolute truth. So they called conventional truth samvriti satya, satya being the Sanskrit word for truth. And samvriti means conformable to evidence or conformable to real impressions, vritti, impressions. And for absolute truth, they used the term paramartha satya, and that means the supreme object of truth. So the truth and truth are different. The difference is really, I feel, essential to know for anyone who tries to exercise their cognitive and probative faculties in a responsible manner. The truth is always about circumstances, actors, and evidence. The truth is what can be verified in that way by evidence. For instance, the truth about who killed John F. Kennedy, the truth about the crisis of global warming or the climate catastrophe, the truth about 9/11, and so forth. Truth, on the other hand, is really an ontological, epistemological, and metaphysical proposition. Truth. What is truth? It's a frame only. It's not something that can be proven by evidence, although it can be convincingly argued by certain propositions, which properly need to be called ontological and epistemological premises. So I've looked a lot into both the truth, especially the truth about the empty cost and World War II. And so I conclude that truth is unity, but the way in which each of us arrives at the truth about one thing or another has many variations. And so truth as unity is something we can all agree on, and we can agree and must agree on certain cases of the truth. But even if we differ in some points on how we investigate a case, such as the pandemic, even if we differ on certain points, there is some unity in the truth. For instance, the truth that it was all an enormous scam. And I don't know if I can get by with that on this channel, but we'll see. Now, with that digression out of the way, I invite you to take a look at this word, legacy. It's kind of a pretentious word in certain ways, you know? Can be, perhaps. I mean, really, do you reflect on your own life ever and think about your legacy? Do you have a legacy? What would it be? What would you like it to be? What would you like to be remembered for? I'm going to answer that question in intimate terms. What I would like to be remembered for. That is my legacy. And I want to say that I want to qualify what I'm going to say first by an important distinction. I don't believe that a true legacy that has enduring value after the life of the individual who leaves it has to be known through famous acts or famous achievements. I'm sure there are many people around the world, simple, decent, hardworking people, who leave legacies, usually inherited by their family and their friends, but they leave legacies. Grandma's apple pie recipe is a legacy. I'm sure there are many elders in communities and families who leave legacies, and these legacies stand as human achievements. They do not have to be human achievements that are preserved in so-called great works of art or literature or sculpture or anything of the sort, or great achievements in the world at large, such as institutions and monuments and buildings. No, no, no. But my legacy does belong to the second class, the second category, and that is a legacy that is marked by certain achievements. So how do I want to be remembered? How do I want my legacy to be seen? What can I tell you about it now while I'm still here to tell you about it, rather than later on when I'm not here, offside, as we say, and people make of my work and my life effort whatever they will, and they make of my reputation whatever they like, because no one makes their own reputation. It's the production of others. Well, I can tell you clearly, and it's really important for me that anyone who ever hears about me knows this. I divide my legacy at a certain point in time between November of 2006, when Not in His Image was published, and August of 2008. So, why do I draw that line? In my own view, the legacy for which I would like to be remembered consists of two factors, and two only. One of them is Not in His Image, and the other is the sacred narrative of Mother Earth, the fallen goddess scenario. Now, the fallen goddess scenario is a myth that I wrote. I didn't entirely invent the myth. I recovered it from lost sources. I put it together like a scattered mosaic so that you could see the picture. But it is my invention. It is the product of the life work of a comparative mythologist and, if you will, a mystic. So there it is. Not in His Image stands for itself, and there are also 4 other books that came out from me before it appeared. The Seeker's Handbook, Twins and the Double, Manhood and Power, and Quest for the Zodiac. So those books are material products, artifacts, if you will, of my writing, and I am a writer. So there you have my legacy as a writer up to that moment, that watershed moment of August 2008. And what I've produced since then came out of an event which I have called the Terma of Gaia Awakening. And all of that all of that in the past, what is it now? 16 years since 2008 belongs to my legacy also, you could say, but it stands apart from what preceded it. And it represents something that I have put into the world that I consider to be esoteric and extremely demanding. So it's important for me to know, and I make this point, I'm making this point right now to the guests and the faculty on my school, Nemata, which is a post-2008 factor in my legacy. I'm making this point. It's important to me that if you have any interest in me at all, you know about this. So what is the essential point of difference between my pre-terma and post-terma legacies? Well, they both make demands upon you. It's not easy reading Not in His Image. It's dense and intense, and it has a lot of information in it, as well as a lot of, shall I say, propositions, which are perhaps beyond the reach of many people. It's demanding. So my pre-terma legacy is demanding in a certain way. I'm a teacher, and it takes a certain determination and intelligence to bring yourself up to the level of what I'm teaching and how I teach it. But the post-terma legacy is even more demanding. You see, in Not in His Image, you can read about the concept of correction or diorthosis. It's a word that only appears 3 times in the Nag Hammadi writings. And there is no surviving material anywhere that I have ever seen that explains what the Gnostics meant by the correction of the Aeon Sophia, aka the living earth, Gaia. So I introduced the concepts of correction, and over time I took the responsibility to elaborate it, but in doing so I went beyond anything that can be found in the ancient sources, way beyond. And so what's demanding in the post-terma legacy is the intelligence and determination and love and enchantment required to participate in correction. And I don't expect anyone to do that. And I'm not waiting for anyone to do that. And I'm not waiting to see the evidence of anyone who attempts to do that. So you could say, I guess, that there's a part of my legacy that's materially proven that you can remember me by. But the other part, it doesn't matter if you remember me by it at all, or even if you know anything about it. And it may well be beyond your reach. In the introductory writings on the terma that I did in October of 2008, I called it a mystico-ludic experience, or a mystico-ludic experiment. Ludic means playful. So there is an element of experimental mysticism to be undertaken in a sober but playful way in the post-terma work that I've put into the world over the last 16 years. Now, I'm not distancing myself from it. I'm certainly not renouncing it. But I am telling you straight out, I do not take any responsibility for what happens if you attempt to undertake participation in the correction of the aeons of fire. Although I am the originator of the program for doing so, which is called Planetary Tantra, I'm moving on. And I don't need to know, and I don't care to wonder about what happens to it. In your mind, in your heart, or in your life. Now, as I conclude, I remind you that I said at the beginning of the Great Recovery Talks that I was making an exception with those talks, rather than acting as the spiritual teacher, a word which I reject, or another internet guru among hundreds. I was simply John from Friendship, Maine, offering some personal advice. So it might be appropriate if I conclude with some personal advice. There's a saying among those people called Shaktas and Kalikas, this small cult of people around the world who have embraced planetary Tantra, that I've often cited. The outcome of the world drama turns on one life at a time. Another version of it is, the fate of the kalpa turns on one life at a time. Kalpa being the term for one day of the cosmic experiment on Earth, which is 25,920 years, one day of aeonic time. I've used the metaphor, a divine experiment, to describe how I see what's happening in this world of ours. And it's not just a metaphor, it's a literal description of what's happening, in my opinion. And I've pointed out that the divine experiment unfolding here has been arranged by its originators, and you can know who they were, find out who they were by learning the narrative of the fallen goddess scenario. They arranged it so that the outcome of the entire experiment, involving countless millions of people living through generations of time, that outcome at any particular moment on any particular day can be determined by one single participant in the experiment. Think about that. You might say, in the language of New Age jargon, that it's a kind of proposition of ultimate empowerment, and indeed it is, although I don't like the word empowerment. I emphasize that proposition, that the world drama, the outcome of it, turns on one life at a time, as an expression of responsibility and not empowerment. So that is your responsibility, should you choose to accept it and pursue it in an intelligent, determined, and thorough-going way. So I'll leave you with that, and I'll frame it in a meme from that old television series, Mission Impossible. This tape contains your Mission Impossible if you decide to accept it. And this tape will self-destruct in 10 seconds.